Hi, I'm Dolly Vasta, and welcome back to Dolly's World. If you saw my next guest sitting at a deli munching on a pastrami and rye, you might not recognize him. But once he opened his mouth, I'm sure you would. About 13 years ago, Jack kind of faded away from the Central Jersey scene, and no one saw or heard from him since, until one brilliant morning I tuned in on WCTC, and there he was. It's Jack, and I'm back.
It may seem like 13 years, but it was actually 1994, and I didn't fade away. I was summarily fired by the
I was going to ask you.
The radio station on in typical broadcasting form.
Right.
It was, "Hi, good show. Don't come back Monday." That's radio. That's how it's done, and I left. That was what happened.
So what have you been doing in the interim? And where have you been?
Buying a palatial mansion. No, I bought a house in Huntington Valley of Pennsylvania.
Oh, that's pretty up there.
Yeah, it's almost New Jersey. It's about 10 miles from the New Jersey border. And I was in radio. I got into Philadelphia radio. And I must be, you remember Joe Blifstick in the comics, the guy with the black cloud over his head all the time?
I always thought I was related to him.
Yeah, well, he was my cousin. So at any rate, we went down there, and the radio station I was working for decided to change format, which doesn't say much for the talent. It was a radio station which was wildly successful, and they just flipped it, and they started to play music of the 80s, which was horrible music, just gosh awful music. And so all of us who did talk radio were let go, and an announcer without a radio station is really an announcer without a radio station. I didn't know what to do. I thought about writing the great American novel. That idea came and went real fast. I got into real estate and made a great deal of money. Boy, the market is scorching hot. But I hated it. What am I doing in real estate? And the phone rang one day, and I couldn't believe it. It was WCTC, and the guy said, "Would you like to come back?" It's like, would you like to breathe again? Would you like not to drown? So I gave it a lot of thought, 30 seconds, and said yes. And then I hung up the phone, and my wife said to me, "Gee, that's terrific. We're not moving tomorrow or the next day. We just bought the house. We're in it 2 months, 3 months maybe." So that's a big problem. I commute every day. As a matter of fact, on the show today, the subject was, have you ever nodded off at the wheel? And like 1,000 people called in and said they had done that. You're driving, and all of a sudden your eyes start getting heavy, and you find yourself on the wrong side of the road.
Right.
It happened to me last night. I found myself stopped in the middle of Route 1. Hello. So it's been a challenge getting back and forth every day.
Well, if I remember correctly, you've always been a workaholic. Now, it's some years later, even if I saw you, haven't seen you rather since 1989, are you still a workaholic? Do you still do like 3 jobs in a day?
No, that ended.
That ended.
There was a time in my career, see if I can remember. It was just after I left WCTC the second time. I've been there 3 times.
Right.
They're going to have to bury me in the parking lot. And I went to work for a computer company doing their public relations. So that was job number 1. Job number 2 was was working for another radio station in New Jersey. So it was actually, I worked for the radio station in the morning, then went to the computer company, and then went home and did from my house a network show, radio show, heard all over America. So I would be getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and ending up my show at night at 11 o'clock at night.
Long day.
Yeah, it's stupid. How much money can you want? And Ted Brown, who was a very famous radio announcer in New York City, was known all over the metropolitan area. He was a very funny guy. He's funnier than I, Mr. Stern. He was. This was back in the 70s. He was on WNEW AM, and he was very, very big. I mean, if you went into New York and said Ted Brown, Connecticut, Ted Brown, they knew who he was. New Jersey, Ted Brown. But he went to Florida one time, and he said, Ted Brown, and I said, who? And it dawned on him that unless you're Johnny Carson or the President of the United States, there's somebody, someplace is not going to know who you are. So it dawned on me, no matter how hard I work, I'm not Johnny Carson. They're not going to know me in Podunk. So why kill yourself trying? And besides, why would you want somebody in Podunk to know who you are?
I don't know. Unless you're big in Podunk and nowhere else. I don't know.
No, I put in a long day. I get up with the dog at 5:30 in the morning. He's got to go lift a leg, and I'll end the day, probably get home about 6 o'clock at night. So that's 12 hours. That's long enough.
Don't you find there's a period of time, at least I do, where you start to wind down? And this is the time, because I very rarely shoot at 3 in the afternoon. I usually shoot early because I feel I can remember things earlier than I can by 3:30 in the afternoon.
No, I don't wind down.
You don't kind of wind down and need a short nap?
I think one of the big problems with me as a human being is I do everything at 100 miles an hour.
Oh, that's true. I walked in here today and I said, he hasn't changed. He hasn't changed a bit. I could tell from how he talked to me on the phone.
The cameras come on, I wake up and it's like I'm on speed or some crazy drug. Or, you just learn that in radio, no matter how tired you are. I can remember, and I think you were active in it. Do you remember I created a multimedia show for the New Jersey Highway Authority.
Right,
and I think I had you do
it.
some voicing for it.
Yes, yes.
Well, there was a kid named Elliot who was an engineer at WCTC, and he died, but that's not the story. And we were working at our Parkway offices. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and he collapsed on a countertop. There were no beds or anything, so there was a countertop, and he just said, I'm about to faint. And I said, okay, I'll keep on working. And I just kept on going. I don't know, it's like adrenaline or something or other. And he woke up about an hour later, and I said, let's go, let's go. So but to other people, it's a pain in the neck to have somebody, a nut like me around. I bother people. I do.
Like people who are tired.
Well, people who want to sit down and just talk, and I don't want to do that. It's a waste of time.
Why? Do you feel it's because you talk a 4 or 5 hour stretch on your television, radio show?
Oh, I don't mean to be rude. I find most people boring.
Well, excuse me. I'll take a nap.
I said most people. I left it out there, Dolly.
You can just entertain by yourself then. I'll take that nap I usually take.
No, for a guy who's in radio, I'm really bad at small talk. I just cannot make small talk. Put me in a room at a party with 30 people who are talking about babies and grass, the kind that you cut with a lawnmower.
Right.
And I'm like the most boring, I just snooze. I have nothing to say. I can't make small talk. I don't know.
You were meant for bigger things.
It's so kind to say that. No, it's just some people are very good at it. They can just babble on.
Well, when I'm not doing this babbling on, I'm usually home reading, sitting in a corner somewhere. So I do know how you feel about it. Do you find that over the years, and as most of us don't want to admit that we're getting older, or the aging process is taking place, that you do change now? I looked at
I changed my pills.
You changed your pills.
Keep taking stuff to keep your hair in place. Yeah.
You're screwing me up here, Jack. But do you find that what you couldn't tolerate in people years ago, you can just flick it right off?
If you're asking me if I've mellowed, the answer is no.
Well, I was trying to get around the word mellow. I didn't want to use the word mellow.
No.
You don't? You haven't gotten, you use an expression all the time on your show. I hate stupidity. Exactly what is stupidity to you? Small talk?
Do I say that?
Yeah, you do.
No, it's when people do dumb things. I called, I'm not going to name names because I don't have to share this with you.
Listen, I don't
but
want to
I called
get
a guy
letters
today
either.
to have an interview with him, an official of the state of New Jersey. And the guy's replied, he told my producer, he said, send me the questions, fax me the questions. And I went crazy. George Bush doesn't ask us to fax him the questions. The governor doesn't say, fax me the questions. I didn't tell you to fax me the question. And this very highly placed government official said to me, fax me the question. I went crazy. So that's one of those stupid things. Why would somebody say something dumb like that? I don't know.
I don't know. I've gotten those from interviews over the years.
Fax me the question?
Yes, fax me the questions.
How about
And
if I chew your food for you or something? You know.
Yeah. Well, I never know till I'm up here. I just jot down thoughts, and as they come to me, or I listen to what someone's saying, and play off of that. But that is unless you don't have anything interesting to say. Then I go back to my list of questions. Anyway, so you don't really have a definition for stupidity. It's something that just annoys you.
Stupid people, I don't know, stupid people do stupid things. I guess some people think stupidity is not being educated. That has nothing to do with education. It's
Attitude?
Yeah, the Jewish people have an expression, it's called seichel. It means knowing the right thing to say at the right time. The French call it savoir-faire, saying the right thing at the right time. And people who say the wrong thing at the wrong time, they're just dumb. Why would you do? I'll never forget, many, many, many years ago, there was an airplane crash in the sky over Brooklyn. 2 planes collided. We're going back 100 million years. And everybody died, everybody. So one of this New York reporters, very famous reporter, name is not important, somehow gets one of the family. And he said to him, "What do you feel like right now?" "Oh, he's feeling happy, he's just hiding it." The guy's kid was just killed.
Yeah.
What? That's stupid. How could that report, no matter how much you want a story, you don't walk up to somebody whose son just died and say, what are you feeling right now? Hello. So that's what I call dumb. The wrong thing at the wrong time.
Where were you on 9/11?
In my living room?
Were you?
Yeah. My
weren't
daughter.
on the air.
My daughter. No. My daughter called me up. It was before I got the job at WCTC. My daughter called me, and she said, "Turn on your TV. A plane just crashed into the World Trade Center." So I turned it on, and I thought it was an accident because there had been another time when a bomber had crashed into the Empire State Building many, many, many years ago. And like half of your audience, I was watching, and all of a sudden I see the second plane. And then, all hell broke loose. So that's why everybody says they remember. As with the death of Kennedy, you remember exactly where you were, exactly what you were doing. It's one of those, everybody remembers where they were when Kennedy was shot.
Well, I was out feeding the fish in the pond, and Joe came out on the back deck, and he said to me, "A plane just crashed into the Tower Center." And I said, another idiot. I really never thought of what it really turned out to be, a terrorist attack. I don't know why, I just didn't. And he came running out again, and he said to me, "The tower's falling down."
Yeah.
And then I went flying in, and it was from there on. I don't think we moved from that set for the next 24 hours at least.
Yeah, probably.
We were glued.
Probably when you look back at your life and you figure out the most horrific things that you ever saw in your life, the sight of those towers tumbling down. Yeah. And when you try to describe it to somebody who might not have seen it, but the whole world saw it, 25 years from now, if we're still here, try telling somebody about that moment, and they won't be able to picture it. As a matter of fact, you bring up a really good point. To those of us who have gone to Ground Zero and seen it, it's awesome. Do you know how big Ground Zero is? Mm-hmm. We're not talking about a building fell down. We're talking about the 2 biggest buildings in New York City, 2 of the biggest buildings in the world. I've been in those buildings, or I had been in those buildings, and the concourse was immense, and the trains downstairs, and we're talking about monsters. For them to fall is just astounding. You know that the temperature is 1,000 degrees underneath it all? It's just inconceivable. So anyway, I often wondered if people in Wyoming understood the magnitude of the tragedy. Some building in New York fell down. They've never seen a building that big. They don't understand how big it is. If they think of some 5-story office building in Laramie, Wyoming, we're talking about 110 floors. It's mind-blowing. You know, when Kennedy was assassinated, I was on the air at WCTC, and the newsman, a guy named Art Mackwell, hands me a piece of what we call news copy. Mm-hmm. And it said, the President of the United States has been shot. So you read that on the air, and then what do you do next? You're a disc jockey, you're playing music. Do you go back to playing a Sam Cooke song? What do you do next? I don't know what I did next. It couldn't have been very intelligent. I didn't know what to say. I remember saying, well, maybe he was shot in the hand. We didn't know anything. It said, the President of the United States has been shot, more news to come. That's all they told us.
Right, I remember that well.
So for the next 15 minutes, I'm telling my audience, hopefully, nobody thought he would die. You know, if you get shot in the shoulder, you get shot in the chest, you get shot in the leg, there's always a chance you survive. Nobody said a bullet went through his brain. So what I'm trying to tell you is, the news was so sketchy in the beginning, even though we saw it on television, nobody knew what to do. Do you get in your car and try to drive to New York? You wouldn't have gotten in. But your inclination is to get in your car and drive. If you're a newsman, drive to New York.
That's true.
Got to be there. Got to get the story. We had a guy who's now a vice president of CBS. You remember the big blackouts back in the 60s, 70s?
Yes, yeah.
This guy was a very small man. He couldn't have been more than 5 foot tall. He was a newsman. I mention his height because of what he did. The blackout comes, and he said, I have to go to New York. What are you going to do? He said, I'll figure that out when I got there. What he did was he walked up the 80 flights of stairs. This is a little tiny guy. 80 flights of stairs so he could broadcast into his tape machine what it looked like looking out on dark. I mean, his description was incredible. Imagine New York pitch black. Not a traffic light. You could see cigarettes being lit on the streets. His report was astounding. And that's why he became a vice president of CBS, because that's what good newsmen do. They go. So if you ask me what's it like in 9/11, got to go. Got to be there.
Everybody else was trying to get out.
Well, like the firemen, we had to go.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I don't mind telling you this. I went to WCTC, and I knocked on the door, and I volunteered my time because they had done away with all programs. They were just doing solid news.
Right.
They turned me down. I can understand why. I was an outsider at the time. It was the old management. It was the guy who had fired me, so he wasn't terribly thrilled. And I can understand him doing that. But he had to understand why I was there. I had to be there, offering my services.
Well, it was good of you.
Yeah, and he did probably the right thing, too, in telling me no, because I was an outsider.
Well, he could have sent you and just not been responsible.
Well, I'm not going to bang
for
on him,
you.
but I'm just recounting the story.
Well, I'm on your side. Yeah. Listen, let's get back to radio itself for a second. Do you think that the world of radio hosts has changed in, say, the last 20 years? You know, there are the Howard Sterns and...
I was fooling around on my computer, and I somehow found Monitor.com. Monitor was an old NBC radio show. I hosted it back in the early 70s. Some of the other hosts, Joe Garagiola, Bill Cullen, Ben Grauer,
yeah, I remember
giants,
them all.
Giants in the industry. How I ended up with that show is a long story which you don't have time to listen to, but I ended up in the company of these giants. Talented people like you can't believe. The show died. It went off the air, it died. The reason it died was, although these people are incredibly talented, it didn't keep up with the times. It didn't adapt. Today's people are just as talented in a different way. Howard Stern's a very talented man, if you like what he does. Don Imus is a very talented guy, if you like what he does. 40 years ago, these guys would have been fired summarily. So they are giants in a different way. I don't know if that answers your question. They're just different. Does it make it better? It's different.
Well, what do you think then of the radio shows being on television? So it's
Hard
almost
to do.
a 2-in-1. Yeah, I should imagine.
Hard to do. You're a talking head. Yeah. Hopefully people can watch the show for half an hour, but to watch some guy on the air for 4 hours. And people expect glamour, radio. You know, they want action, because with your voice, you can make things happen.
That's right.
You can describe things, you can get excited, you can come. But when I used to go out to the Middlesex County Fair, people would come over to see us, and we would fake things. We would have records going. We had a complete turntable system. We'd have records going that weren't being on the air. It was just for effect, because people expected action. And I'd be yelling things like, copy boy, what are you talking about? You know, all kinds of crazy stuff to make them think that there was something. Radio is very boring. It's sometimes, in the old days, it was just me and the equipment, and then they brought in a producer and me and the equipment, but it's really not dynamitely exciting to watch. It's exciting to hear. You've got all these callers calling in, crazy people, lunatics, politicians. That's very exciting. But to watch it, what are you going to watch? Watch a telephone light up? I mean, that isn't very exciting, to watch a little white light up. You know, how exciting can that be for an audience? So Imus is on MSNBC, I guess it is, whatever the network that is. And to make it interesting is, you got to have a ton of footage. You got to have 10 cameras and all the equipment in the world. It's very hard to do.
Do you have any favorite callers?
Everybody does.
Really?
In Philadelphia, we had a guy called the Rev. Listen to this. The Rev was blind. And he was blind. It wasn't just telling us a crazy story. He was blind. And he claimed he could see, sort of, not see as you and I know seeing, but he said, and he was absolutely blind. We had doctors tell us he was blind. And he said he could read books. I said, it's impossible. And he said, I don't know what it is. I have another sense. And everybody thought, that old fraud. Dolly, he had to have been able to read. He knew more than any 38 people you ever met in your life. He used to call weekly, and he would give me this incredible stuff. You would have thought he had a computer. This is 20 years before there were computers. We all have callers like that. Here on WCTC, my first 3 weeks back, they all called. They're now 109 years of age. That's fine.
Don't knock 109.
Hey, since I'm 108, it doesn't bother me. But I don't remember names. I don't remember faces, but I remember voices, because I deal with voices all the time. That's the truth. I have no idea. I go to parties, I don't know who my cousins are. But if I hear a voice that I haven't heard for 25 years, I'll tell you exactly who it is. So these people would call up, and I would say, I don't know your name, I don't know where you're from, but I remember you. And we were out at some remote giving away a car or something, and a guy was talking in back of me, and I said, I know you, and he used to call into the show. You know, so everybody has favorite callers. Some of them are crazy, some of them fib and fake. Women with breathtaking voices call in, and you know, they're 84 years of age and stooped and bent over and wrinkled and all that, and they do the sex thing with you, you know, like, hi, Jack. And it's fun. It's a riot. It's a riot. If you take them seriously, you're out of your mind. You've got to laugh and go with it. I wouldn't know what to do if somebody called in and said, I'm about to commit suicide. I really wouldn't know. I wouldn't know whether to laugh because thinking it was a joke, or if it was something deadly serious. And if it was something deadly serious, I really wouldn't know what to do. So we all have callers.
You would know. If you're that good at voices, then you can hear. And from doing this show for so many years, I understand what you're talking about with voices, because I can hear anyone, even these dubs, and pick out who it is. And it's
Okay,
a
next
sound.
guy that threatens to commit suicide, I'm calling you and saying, what do I do with this guy?
You say to him, what are you, crazy?
Well, yeah, the callers make the show. For every person who calls in, they say there's 1,000 listeners that don't call in.
Right.
That's what they say. So you hope for callers. One time I did a show with an Israeli Air Force general. Nobody called. I went crazy. I was screaming at the audience. And a guy finally called up and he said, will you relax? He said, the show was so good with this guy, I didn't want to leave to go to the telephone. So it isn't always how many people call. If you want 1,000 calls, get a psychic on the air. The whole audience turns off except the 30 screwballs who want to hear their fortune. So it isn't the number of lights that light up that's impressive. I could get 100 calls, one right after the other, by just getting a psychic on the air. That isn't it. That's when when you've got a balance between what you're talking about and the calls that come in. Quite truthfully, 3 or 4 calls a half hour is plenty for me. I wouldn't know what to do with 20 calls. What are you going to say? Hello, thank you, goodbye? So 2 or 3, 4 calls a half hour.
Well, before our time is up, tell me one thing. If you had your druthers, what do you want to be doing for the next 10 years, the next
Breathing.
15, 20? Besides breathing and standing up.
No, no brainer. Just keep on trucking, get up, go to work. I couldn't retire. I could never retire. What would I do all day long? Guys who retire and tell me, I have friends in Florida on the Keys, and what do you do all day long? We play handball and paddleball. Good gosh, that's your whole life, playing paddleball? You go home and tell your wife what score? I mean, I go home and I say, I talked to the governor today, or something of that nature. I think it's a little bit more exciting than I played paddleball today, or I shot a 74 on golf. I'd go crazy.
Not only that, it keeps your mind going, because you do have to use your mind when you do these shows, regardless,
Sometimes
whether
I
you're
do.
on camera or
Sometimes I do.
Well, Jack, our time is running out, and I know we had to squinch this in between your time availability and the studio's availability, but I'm so glad to see you again.
Sure.
I've loved you since I was a wee girl.
We just became deadly enemies.
I was dying to use that in the introduction, and I felt, I'd probably turn you right off if I did it. I wanted to get it in.
Yeah, invite me back again, I'll come.
To all of you out there, I hope you enjoyed listening to the show as much as I did doing it. Take care, and I'll see you all next month.